Welcome to another episode of...
Meal planning is important because it prevents us from being a disappointed wreck when dinner time comes around and we have no clue what to make, or even if we have the ingredients to make the meal. It's a time and a money saver, but most importantly, it frees up valuable brain space. Creating a meal plan prepares us for the week to come and gives us peace of mind that we're organized and can feed ourselves and our family. That's why I do it, and that's why Plan to Eat helps me do it. Your subscription includes access to the Plan to Eat website and fully featured mobile apps on iOS and Android. And Plan to Eat gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website, the ones your family loves and that fit your dietary preferences and needs. And you can create a meal plan around your schedule. Then what happens is the Plan to Eat software automatically creates an organized shopping list based on your plan. So sign up for your free trial at plantoeat.com/timecrafting. That's plantoeat.com/timecrafting. The coupon will be automatically applied to your account and can be used when you're ready to subscribe. It's valid for new customers only. Give Plan to Eat a try today.
The Productivityist Podcast. I am Mike Vardy, your intrepid host and master of ceremonies here at Productivityist. Of course, I'm the founder, which also helps. I want to talk to you a little bit today about something as we reach the tail end of the first month of the year, and I head into Groundhog Day, which is the start of my new year. I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the things that I'm really trying to do more and more every single passing year, and that's read more. I want to spend more time reading and less time kind of consuming television. In fact, over the past few years, I've gotten a lot better at pulling away from, you know, the boob tube and recording things more intentionally. So there are things that I love watching. Make no mistake. It was funny. I was talking to my wife about this, and Tony Robbins did an interview with Marie Forleo about a month or so ago, and a little over that. And it was when his book came out, and one of the things she asked him was how he unwinds at night, and his answer was, "Well, I don't." That's what my wife would say. But one of the things he does is he kind of watches, you know, basic mindless television, things that are not going to really keep his mind going. And that's kind of what I do. My wife actually mentioned that too. That's what she does at the end of the night. And some of the shows that Tony Robbins watches, actually, she watches. She's more into like the revenge and the how to get away with murder and those kind of shows. Whereas I'm more into the let's watch the comic book shows. Let's watch, pro wrestling, which again is something I've not talked about a lot over the past initial phase of my career. But no, I'm comfortable with it now. Yeah, I will dive into some of the old school WWF, WWE stuff from time to time. I kind of find that noise in the background somewhat comforting. It's not like I have to pay a whole lot of attention to keep up with what's going on there as well. But there are things that I definitely want to make time to watch. Having a solid Netflix queue is pretty decent. But really, I only have about 3 television shows. So I'll watch documentaries and stuff. But that to me is almost like reading in terms of just absorbing good nonfiction. I'm trying to read more fiction these days, too. This past year, I read more fiction, some of John Scalzi's work. Of course, he did Lock In, and he did Red Shirts. I've also spent some time reading a few more fiction books, and I want to do more of that in 2014 or 2015 rather. But I also want to spend more time, reading actual books, like paper books. In fact, my office, as it's being finished up, will have a very large floor-to-ceiling bookcase. I'm going to mention the Ryan Holiday post about how to create a library in your own home. I'll put that in the show notes as well. But that's something I really want to do, is have more paper books. My paper library is increasing. And one of the things I've decided to do, and I started doing this last year, is in order to read better, I'm connecting more with the paper books that I have. I have, yes, my iPad mini, and I have my Kobo, and I've got books in there. But really, what I want to have some paper books that I can look at on the shelf and grab. So the Tony Robbins book is one that I bought in paper form because I want to focus more on, in the years to come, really getting better at understanding where my money is going and how to manage it, not just for myself, but for my whole family. I want to future-proof the lifestyle that we have, and in fact, maybe even increase it over the years. So I want to make sure that I have a better understanding of that. And having that, but there's something about having that book stare me right in the face versus having it buried in my iPad or in a Kindle or something like that gives it more power. And there is some real power in paper, which I've talked about in terms of capture and as a productivity gateway. But in book form, it still has that weight. I mean, when I got the front 9 printed out in book form, it felt more like a book. It gave me some, there's some weight to it. The other thing I do, and I'm going to do more of, continue this tradition rather, is wherever I buy a book when I'm traveling. So if I pick up a book while I'm traveling, I will write on the inside cover either the reason I picked it up or something about the trip or what have you, to kind of connect with that as well. So, for example, when I was in New York a little over a year ago, I picked up Here's New York by E.B. White based on the recommendation of someone that was at an event. And they said, it'll help you have a better understanding of New York. And I picked it up and I read it from cover to cover. It's a short read on my flight from New York to Toronto. And I wrote in it. That was the first book I really actually did that with. And I kind of offered some thoughts out. And then when I was at South by Southwest, I picked up a copy of Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, which is apparently going to be made into a movie directed by Chris Nolan, which should be interesting. And that was based on a recommendation from my buddy Ryan Christensen here in Victoria, who said, there's this great book you should read. And he gave me that recommendation eons ago. So I actually captured that in a paper notebook, and then I put it into Todoist, and lo and behold, when I was at South by, it was one of the only fiction-oriented books that was in the bookstore, and I said, I'm going to pick it up, and I sat down for about 45 minutes in the Austin Convention Center and read the book and just couldn't pull myself away. So writing inside the book, making it mine, especially the books that matter. GTD, I've done that with as well. And I actually started to take some of the Post-it notes because I'm not going through these Evernote Post-it notes nearly as quickly as I would have thought, is I'm putting some notes in there as well that I'm leaving little clues behind for my children or whatever if they happen to look at these paper books years down the road. So there's something about that that's going to help me not just read more, but read better. I almost look forward to picking up a book on every trip now, which is a great feeling. The other thing that I'm doing more of and plan to do more of is really spend more time in Blinkist in 2015, especially now that they've upped their the way that the product works. Blinkist 3.0 now has audio, so much like I use Audible for certain things, which, again, Audible I kind of use as a previewing ground to a certain extent as well. I love listening to fiction on Audible, but for nonfiction books, I think that I tend to digest those better in written form. But with Blinkist, now that they've got these business books that are in audio form and they're short little almost Cliff Notes versions, they're blinks, or audio blinks, I guess now at this point. It's almost like listening to a podcast in a lot of ways. A very extended podcast, but I like that. I like the fact that if I want to listen to a book or get the basic information from a book, then I'm getting that much closer to the old days of going to HMV and listening to an album on the wall before I decided to buy it. It's the same thing that I'm doing with Blinkist in terms of reading and in terms of absorbing in an audible sense. So Blinkist is a great tool for those who want to pick up more nonfiction books, but they don't want to spend all the money on them up front. They'd just rather have a subscription-based service. And then they can get the basic gist of the book, and not even just the basic gist, but actually quite a good comprehensive look at the major elements of each of the books that are out there. And the library keeps expanding. So I really, really like what Blinkist has been offering. I've been using their service for a while. Make no mistake, I've mentioned this on the blog, of course. I am an affiliate for them. So I do, every time somebody signs up for Blinkist, if you use my link, which will be in the show notes, you're going to kick a bit more back my way, which is great. If you're not supporting me via Patreon and you want to support that way and get something out of the deal beyond the perks and Patreon, great. This is another way to do it. So full disclosure there, but I wouldn't be backing and promoting a service if I didn't believe in it and I didn't use it regularly. And Blinkist is one of the ones I use more than any of the other ones that I've that are out there. And I want to spend even more time with it in 2015. So when it comes to reading, that's something I really want to spend more time on. Now, I want to talk before I wrap up, because this is not going to be a typical half-hour episode. But what I want to talk about is my reading workflow. A lot of people have asked me, okay, Mike, so when you start your day, you say you read. You get up, you splash water in your face, you get coffee, you go read. What do you read? Well, my reading workflow is pretty basic, and I've set up my iPad in such a way that it kind of, and I'll kind of grab my iPad right here, right now, so to kind of give you the workflow. And it's evolved over the years, make no mistake, like all other workflows. But when I look at my iPad, I've got my iPad mini has 5 rows. I keep the bottom row open because, I've just been doing it for years and I don't really need a full screen on. But my top row is, I've got the app full in the top left corner. And actually that's what I'm going to do this year is add not just the write 1,000 words, but read for a half hour or more. I might even increase. I'm thinking about increasing it. It was a half hour. I'm going to probably increase it to about an hour. Read an hour every day. So that'll go in there, or some derivative of it. Maybe read a chapter in a book or something like that. But that's where that habit is going to be fostered from, as well as in Timeful a little bit. I'll probably block out some reading time in Timeful, which I mentioned in the calendar apps episode that I'm using Timeful as well. We'll put that link in the show notes as well. As for my reading workflow, I use the app Reader for RSS, and this is again on the iPad. So if you're using Android or something like that, then you may want to find something similar, and there's some similar elements that you can use. So Reader is where all my RSS feeds go through, and I use Feed Wrangler to grab my RSS feeds. Now, Workflow, which is a new app or was a new app, it's still somewhat new, but I can create a PDF RSS feed, and I'll link to Federico Vitici's post about how to create a RSS workflow using that Workflows app. But I use Reader, and then what I'll do is Reader is set up automatically to grab all the feeds from Feed Wrangler, and I see all of my new articles. So anything that's new, I will look at, and then what I do is I look at the article and I have a couple of options. Number one, I look at it, scan it, and then just move to the next one. And I can do that right now because I'm actually doing it. So here we go. So if I want to take a look at, let's say, here we go, Long Live Stephen Colbert. So this is an article that was, and as I'm recording this, of course, I'm looking back at some of the older articles I have here, but here's one about Colbert. So here's an article by a friend of mine, Stephen Hackett. So what I'll do is if I want to read this fully and absorb it, plus it's got a YouTube link in here, there's a little move button or share button at the bottom right-hand corner of Reader, and I will move that to Instapaper. So Instapaper is kind of like my second line of defense. So the way I look at it is Reader is kind of like the first pass. Skim through, see what's there. A lot of my productivity-related feeds are there. A lot of work-related ones are all there. I will look at those and then move them over. I use Twitter for a lot of this stuff too, but chances are I will mostly see this stuff in Reader. And you will probably want to set up a good RSS structure if you're a writer to cover a lot of the topics that you're interested in right in your RSS app. So I've just moved over to Instapaper. It tells me it has, and that's the end of it. So once I've gone through all of my unread feeds, it'll show me 0. So I've gotten to inbox 0, quote unquote, for Reader. Then I move on to an app called Zeit. And what Zeit does is it actually allows me to have a magazine. Now, I like the older version of Zeit better, but since it was bought by CNN, it's still quite good. So I can actually take a look at it and say, all right, I want to look at all of the apps that are, it's learned my behavior. So it knows exactly what I'm using here in terms of, the kind of categories or topics I follow. So I can look at this, and here's one, a visual time management called Chronodex. So I'm looking at this, and it's opening it up, and it's it's the Chrono Notebook, basically. It looks a lot like the Chrono Notebook. I want to look at this again, and I'm going to actually, now this is in Zeit, so I can move it to one of the following. I can move it to Instapaper, Twitter, I can move it to Evernote, and I'm going to move this to Instapaper for now. Instapaper, again, is my second line of defense. It's directly connected to Instapaper, and boom. I'm not going to read this directly right now. There's a few others in here. There's, How Knowing Yourself Leads to More Productivity and Efficiency by Entrepreneur. That's one I'll want to read later. I don't do the upvoting that Zeit allows or any of that stuff. I basically am going through this on my main page, my main cover of my Zeit magazine, because that's what these are called, to see exactly what apps I want to look at. Now I can go into the sidebar in the upper right-hand corner and look at different things. So here's one so if I want to look at one that's specific to time management, I've got a category time management, and I can actually look at that and do the same thing. So that's the next level, right? That's the next kind of phase, because at this point, what I'm doing is I can actually take a look, and there's more Chronodex stuff. As I'm looking at this, it's basically it looks like Chronodexes are coming back. Interesting, but anyways, I can look at all this stuff and see what I want to save into Instapaper. So Zeit is a really effective one, but again, you got to kind of teach it. Okay, you got to teach it what you like. So once I'm done that, Then I go to Instapaper and review what's in my queue. Now, some stuff stays in Instapaper longer than it probably should. I'll be the first to admit it, and that's something else I'm going to work on in 2015 is making sure I can get things out of Instapaper or putting it into folders. I don't really like things on Instapaper all that much either, so I don't do the social stuff with it. I basically use it. It's my second phase. So first phase, the gateways are Zeit and Reader. The second phase is Instapaper. And what'll happen is in Instapaper, if I really like it, and I want to use it somewhere, so maybe I want to use it in a blog post, or maybe I want to use it as research for an upcoming book, or maybe a course or something like that, at that point, Instapaper does allow me to move it to Evernote. And if it makes it to Evernote, it's in the final phase. It means I'm going to do something with it at some point in time, whether it's a social share that I want to be a bit more, intentional about, whether it is, and by intentional, I mean get a bit more in depth and don't just do a quick retweet or a plus one or a like or a simple share, or it'll end up being something I kind of look at and strategize around or write a post about. So the Chronodex is probably something I'll talk about, bringing it back to the old Muji Chronobook days or something along those lines. But the example, so for right now, I can see the visual time management that someone created. I will click on the upper right-hand corner. It will ask me where I want to put it. I will put it in Evernote, and I will put it into. I'll either leave it in my inbox, and that's normally what I'll do because I'm not quite sure where I want to put it yet. But I'll go in my inbox. Then when I process my Evernote inbox, I'll be able to take a look at it. And then once I'm done that, I can actually archive it in Instapaper. So again, workflow real quick. And then once it's in Evernote, by the way, then at that point, now I'm in the writing and creation phase. So that's idea management, which we'll get to at another point in time in another podcast. But my reading workflow, and this has been working for me for quite some time. So I don't see myself really altering it all that much. I mean, I could replace Instapaper with Pocket, same difference. I could replace Zeit with Flipboard. I actually stopped using Flipboard because it didn't have the ability to get things to Instapaper very quickly. So that may change if workflow starts to add some more workflows that allows for that, or extensibility allows for that. I also don't take the stuff in Instapaper and put it into drafts, thanks to iOS, because I don't want things in drafts that aren't actually going to be something that I'm definitely going to write about. Like I want to know what I'm writing about when I send it from drafts. I want to say, hey, this is going to be about this. Evernote, it goes into Evernote to kind of incubate a bit. Drafts is not a place for incubation. Evernote is definitely a place for that. So again, this reading workflow has really worked well for me over the course of the past couple of years. And it's going to continue to probably get better because I make slight little tweaks to it and stuff. Instapaper, I'm going to get better at that. I really need to get better at managing my Instapaper queue for myself. And I know I'm not alone in that. A lot of you out there probably do. I've actually created a task in Todoist called Review Instapaper Queue, and it's a repeating task that happens every 3 weekdays. So that way I can take a look at it, or every 3 days rather. So that way I can take a look at it and make sure that I'm either filing things or archiving them or getting them where they need to go, because that thing can get really out of control. And imagine your Instapaper queue if it was actual sheets of paper. That'd be pretty crazy. I do use my iPad as a primary reading tool, more so than my Kobo, because if I had a Kindle, it'd probably change the game a bit, but my Kobo is smaller and I'm in progressive lenses, so it's a little bit trickier to read. I do want to get a Kindle at some point because then I can bring it to the beach and don't have to worry about glare and all that stuff, but that's down the line. And again, being Canadian, you don't get the same ones right away as you do in the States. So to recap, Reader, again, full. I will track how I'm reading, which I think is important, especially the new reading habits I want to build in 2015. Also, Reader is the place where everything begins in terms of all the information that's coming at me. I don't look at anything in the morning before I look at Reader, so I can kind of wake up. The reading actually wakes me up. Then I go to Zeit to go through more specific topics of interest that may not be in my RSS feed. Anything from those two areas will wind up in Instapaper first. Then from Instapaper, I will then decide where it's going to go, whether it goes to Evernote, whether it just gets archived, whether it goes into a folder and I've contemplated leaving some research folders in Instapaper as well. But again, I want less places to look for this kind of stuff. So everything ends up in Evernote in some way, shape, or form, or it just gets tossed. But looking at my iPad front page, right below those top 4 apps in my top row, the second row is Flipboard, which I still kind of look at for videos and devour in specific channels. Blinkist is there, which of course, like I said, is one I'm really going to want to focus on more in 2015. In fact, Blinkist is now on my iPhone. I normally don't read on my iPhone, but because now the audio versions of the books, the blinks are there, I can now, listen to these blinks. And then my Kindle app is there as well as iBooks. Those are all on my top row, my top 2 rows of my iPad, if I'm looking at it in vertical or portrait orientation. So my iPad is my primary reading device. I do not read Instapaper on my Mac. The only time I use it on my Mac is if I am when I'm assembling the newsletter, because that's where I'll grab the links from for the recommended reading. I do not read my RSS feeds on my Mac. I tried that with Reader and a bunch of other apps. It just didn't work for me. I like the comfort factor of being able to wake up, get my morning routine going, grab my cup of coffee, grab my NutriBlast, and sit in my chair and read like I'm reading a paper. Like the good old days, in front of with my iPad mini in my hand, my coffee in the other, and just reading through the things that matter to me, the things that I want to build more stuff off of or just know more about. So there you have it. That's reading more and reading better, for me, and I want to get better at it. And I hope that, again, as someone who wants to improve their writing, I want to read more. Again, a writer reads, and I need to do more of that. And I want to build a better workflow with that throughout the course of the year. And maybe just maybe, what I've provided for you in this podcast episode will help inspire you to create a better reading workflow or create one at all that you can use to kind of process information more critically and spend more time absorbing information through words than through images on your television screen or even on your computer screen. Thanks again for listening this week to the episode that really was just me talking about how I read. Thanks to all my Patreon supporters. If you are interested in supporting the podcast, please, again, there's links in the show notes. $1, you'll get access to the activity feed. $5, you get a sneak peek at everything. $10, you get not just that, but you get the Task Apps Made Easy course that Steve Dotto and I developed together. And if you hit that $50 mark, which is a limited Patreon contribution, you'll get a 20-minute coaching call with me every month, which includes a recap email and accountability follow-up. So there are lots of perks there. Go to patreon.com/productivityist if you want to pitch in. If you have ideas for the show, fire me off an email. You'll fire them off actually to info@productivityist.com, and either Amy will pick it up, or Amy, who my assistant, will pick it up, or I will get it through. She'll forward it to me and I'll respond. Someone will get back to you though. And if you have your own reading tips and you want to submit them in audio form, you can do that as well. Just submit the audio file and we'll pick it up, and hopefully, maybe, who knows, we'll get it on the show, and that way people can listen to it as well. So thanks again so much for taking the time to spend about a half hour with me, about 25 minutes with me here on the Productivityist podcast this week. Until next week, go forth, read more, read better, and we'll see you next week.